An appeal to the Washington State Supreme Court to allow a referendum effort on the new income tax law to proceed was officially denied today. Now, the conservative political group Let's Go Washington initially filed a referendum request with the Office of the Secretary of State to say we should let the people, weigh in on this. Senate Bill 6346 was attached with a referendum clause addendum, basically to say this is so essential to the state budget that voters should not at this point have an opportunity to weigh in via referendum. Let's Go Washington challenged that and said, wait a minute, this bill should not be essential to the implementation of the state budget at this point because it doesn't even take effect until 2029 based on 2028 tax returns for millionaires in the state of Washington. Well, Secretary of State Steve Hobbs rejected that referendum, and then Let's Go Washington went back and appealed that. Well, today the secretary, or the state Supreme Court, weighed in and said, we reject that appeal to the decision from the Secretary of State. They put in part, consistent with the words of the Constitution and our unbroken line of precedent, we hold that engrossed second substitute 6346 falls within the exception for laws that are necessary for the support of the state government and not subject to referendum under Article 2, Section 1, that would be of the state constitution. Now, when Secretary of State Steve Hobbs rejected the measure, he cited the fact that state lawmakers had attached that necessity clause to the bill, stating that despite the fact the millionaire's tax does not take effect until 2029 based on 2028 tax returns, it is necessary for the immediate implementation of the state budget. And Let's Go Washington and founder Brian Haywood, their whole argument was, wait a minute, if it's really essential and necessary, an emergency to the state budget, show me where the necessity is for that right now, based on the fact that we're not going to see these profits for 3 years. And today I spoke with Hallie Balch with Let's Go Washington, and she told me, the referendum's not happening now. We're exploring other options, but she was actually encouraged by the fact that the state Supreme Court said, we're basing this on earlier precedents from the same court that said, this is a necessity, so we're not going to move forward with it. We give deference to state lawmakers. She says, if in fact they're going to be relying on their earlier precedents, maybe they will do the same when it comes to the income tax finally reaching the state court, because you remember the state Supreme Court here in Washington has many times already ruled that our state constitution violates an income tax. We can't have that because we have a uniformity clause in the state of Washington. In other words, if millionaires are going to be taxed at this 9.9% rate, everybody else has to be as well. So they were trying to kind of put a positive spin on today's decision. There will also likely be initiatives to come. Referendum's an easier bar to reach. You don't have to have nearly as many signatures. But Let's Go Washington is confident that Washington taxpayers are so upset about the new income tax that they would sign on to an initiative, whether it goes to the people or to the legislature. And whether that's this year or next year, they're confident they're going to have enough support for that to move it forward. I also today spoke with Washington State Party Chair Shasti Conrad to get her reaction on the decision from the state Supreme Court to not allow the referendum to move ahead.
I would just say, we're really proud of both, the governor and our majority in the state legislature for getting the millionaire's tax passed. It's something that has been, asked for decades. There's been so much work done to fix our regressive tax system. It's really nice to see some movement. And, we expect that there will be ongoing challenges, coming to try to put a stop to it. But we know that it's popular, even with some Republicans. We've heard a number of Republicans who have said actually that they're in support of it. And that everyone needs to remember that it's only taxes on income that are in excess of 1 million. So your first million's free if you're making that annually. If you're making, $1 million or less annually, don't have to worry about a thing. If you're making more than $1 million in income annually, then yeah, you're going to pay a little bit more and pay your fair share to help the state.
And now to Monday's not entirely unexpected decision from the state Supreme Court, a ruling based on an appeal that came from Let's Go Washington. The political group had asked the Secretary of State for permission to move forward with a referendum after the new income tax law, Senate Bill 6346, was signed into law. Let's Go Washington said, okay, lawmakers, you may have attached this necessity clause, making it an emergency, but we don't believe it really is. And so they went to the Secretary of State. Secretary of State Steve Hobbs denied Let's Go Washington and said, nope, there's a referendum proof clause attached here. You can't do that. They appealed to the state Supreme Court and on Monday received a denial, a rejection of that opportunity to move forward with a referendum. Um, in that ruling, though, there was some interesting language that was attached when they said, no, you can't move forward. They said, this is not happening now. But part of that, the court wrote, and we'll put up this graphic, you can see they said, consistent with the words of the Constitution, we hold that engrossed substitute second bill or Senate Bill 6346 falls within the exception for laws that are necessary for the support of the state government and are not subject to referendum under Article 2, Section 1. The interesting part here is that the state Supreme Court is saying we have unbroken years of legal precedent here, our own court precedent that says if there's a necessity or an emergency clause attached to a bill, we'll kind of stay out of it. Basically, that's not our wheelhouse. We're going to let lawmakers determine whether or not it is essential to the budget and the governance of the state. So we'll stay out of it. So the thinking here for folks who are hoping to move forward to undo the recently passed income tax or those who are backing the legal challenge, they believe that that language in the court's ruling on Monday bodes well for them. So former AG Rob McKenna had a conversation with him this morning. He is, as you may well know, leading the legal challenge alongside Citizen Action Defense Fund and former state Supreme Court Justice Phil Talmadge, who's a Democrat, basically saying, we believe that this is an unconstitutional tax on the income of Washingtonians based on the fact that Washington's constitution says that income is your property and your property has to be taxed at a uniform rate. So you can't just single out a tax of 9.9% on income in excess of $1 million. So here again, a part of my conversation today with former AG Rob McKenna, kind of getting his take on the ruling that came down yesterday.
Well, it wasn't a great surprise, and I noted with interest the reference in the order to an unbroken line of rulings by the court that budget measures are not subject to a referendum. So that's good, and I trust the court will follow the unbroken line of rulings which have held that income is property under our state's very expansive definition of property, which is everything tangible and intangible subject to ownership. So that part was good to see. There is an unbroken line of rulings holding that budget bills are not subject to referendum. However, I think the plaintiffs here thought they saw a narrow path forward, which made this case different, and that is that this tax measure will not produce any revenue for the state budget until 2029. And therefore, they can argue that this bill is not necessary to support the state budget because it's not going to produce revenue in the state budget for several years. So that was their path forward. The Supreme Court disagreed, but it does this ruling does underscore that the legislature has, by including the language they did in the bill that the bill was necessary to support the state government, has worked very deliberately to keep this measure, this new income tax, away from voters.
So again, it's that darned necessity clause attached to the legislation that precludes voters from a referendum. And lawmakers are using that necessity or the emergency clause more and more in recent years. In fact, we wrote extensively about that in a series of articles last year after the legislative session ended, when lawmakers in the minority were saying, hey, wait a minute. I think it was 183 bills during the 2025 session that had this, attached, which preclude lawmakers, or preclude, I should say, voters from having opportunity to weigh in via referendum. Now, remind you, it's easier to get a referendum on the ballot. It's about half the number of signatures required for an initiative. So it's a much heavier lift to get an initiative to the ballot than it is to get a referendum to the ballot. So precluding a referendum is kind of a big deal. So McKenna says, as far as he's concerned, this is a very concerning trend.
The increasing use, particularly of the first exception, the emergency clause language on every kind of bill you can think of, is a problem because it is systematically undermining the checks and balances which our voters built into the Constitution. It was the voters who said we want the power of initiative and we want the power of referendum, which is the power to subject an adopted bill to a public vote. And when they make wider and wider use of the emergency clause in particular, it systematically undermines voters' power to act as the legislature themselves and take a vote on the bill. And that's, I think, extremely unfortunate. There have also been other bills proposed that would also narrow and limit the, if they're adopted, narrow and limit the use of initiative and referenda. So this is a great concern. It is undermining the very system that our voters put in place many years ago.
So let's go Washington again, denied their opportunity for a referendum right now, considering what their next challenge is going to be. It's going to be an initiative, but what that looks like, whether that's this year or next year, that remains to be seen. They're right now talking to some of their supporters and donors, no doubt, because it will take some deep pockets to get this thing moving forward in short order if they hope to get an initiative qualified for the November ballot. Of course, Let's Go Washington already has, a lot of attention that needs to be paid to their two other initiatives that are already qualified for the ballot this year. That is the initiative to restore parental rights and the initiative to protect girls' sports and keep boys out of girls' sports and girls' locker rooms and bathrooms. So they have a lot going on already between now and the November ballot. It is exactly 6 months from now until that happens, a very short period of time. So we're going to be all over that and let you know as soon as we hear any decision from Let's Go Washington on how they're going to proceed forward with the initiative campaign. Okay, this new survey from the Association of Washington Business reveals a whole lot of growing pessimism about the state's economy and the ability to be successful in business in the Evergreen State. The survey was conducted last month by the Association of Washington Business, AWB. About 400 of their members took part, a little more than that, in this survey. And that's a cross section of businesses, small businesses with just a few employees up to some that have a few hundred and into the thousands. Those members kind of are across the board for AWB. And what they found is an increasing number saying they are considering leaving the state of Washington and or relocating their personal residence out of the state, many citing the pending income tax if it ends up being upheld in the courts in Washington as one of the reasons why 1 in 4 now are considering leaving the state of Washington. Now, this is Morgan Irwin with the Association of Washington Business. He is their vice president of government relations. I had a lengthy discussion with him about this late on Wednesday, and he said this is the most alarming of their surveys, which they do quarterly, that they have seen at all. And certainly recently, a large difference of just in the last few months from what their members were saying back in January compared to what they were saying in the month of April.
we do a quarterly survey, and the reason we do a quarterly survey is so that we can show not only where we're at in a single point in time, but we can show trends, over time. One of the things that we added to our survey in January is a person looking to move, a business owner looking to move their personal domicile out of state, so their legal, address out of state. And so that's the only new question we have out there. Everything else are very plain worded questions, and you can look at the report. It's things like, does your business plan to expand in Washington in the next 2 years? So easy questions to answer and understand. What we've seen with our results from this latest survey is a precipitous decline in people's confidence in Washington's economy. And so again, this was, I think, just over 400 employers, business owners around the state responded to this. So pretty good sample size. And when we look at our data, again, comparing even Q1 of this year versus Q2 now, we're seeing, increases in everything you don't want to increase and decreases in everything you do want to increase. So things like, are you confident in our economy? That number has dropped. Are you planning to expand your business? That number has dropped. Are you planning to move your business out of state? That number has increased. Are you planning to move your personal domicile out of state? That went from 45% in January up to 55% 3 months later. Now, a lot of things have happened between, now and January. But the biggest one is that we passed an income tax. So I'm not saying that 100% of that additional 10% in people planning to move their domicile out of the state is about the income tax. But when we take a look around at the things that passed between now and then, that's a pretty big driver. So really, really, really troubling data. It is not everyone's leaving and close up the economy and, we're going to be West Virginia all of a sudden or something like that. It's not. But it is a very troubling trend that's going in the wrong direction in terms of having, a economically vital Washington state.
So Irwin called this really, really troubling data. And he said it's not as if everyone's just going to up and leave the state at this point, but he says it's a troubling trend, certainly moving in the wrong direction for their members who are finding it increasingly difficult to be economically viable in the state of Washington. And the question really is, how much is the coming income tax playing into the response from AWB's members, with a 10% increase from the number of business owners indicating that they are planning to leave and or move their personal residence out of the state. Irwin said a lot of things have happened between January, when the last legislative session started, and April, when we have this new income tax signed into law. Even as a legal challenge moves forward, that's going to take some time to play out. We did, though, this week, you may recall, on Monday, we had the state Supreme Court reject an appeal by Let's Go Washington to allow a referendum to go to voters to repeal this. You may recall the legislation, Senate Bill 6346, had a necessity clause attached to it, precluding a vote of the people. But Let's Go Washington challenged that with the Secretary of State, who declined, and they moved forward and asked the state Supreme Court to have a look at the rejection by the Secretary of State. That was a second denial that came on Monday of this week. An initiative is likely to be coming from Let's Go Washington. Don't know if that's going to be this year or next year, but it sounds like the business environment here and the climate for business in the state of Washington is something to really be concerned about. Now, I did speak with, or rather got an email from an advocacy group called Invest in WA Now. If you're not familiar with them, they're only a few years old, but they're the ones who back the capital gains tax, really back the income tax. They're funded by large union groups. Much of that comes from the Washington Federation of State Employees and the Washington Education Association, which stands to benefit big time by the income tax because of some of that funding going to supplement public education, special education, and some other priorities yet to be defined by supporters of the income tax. But they stand to be big winners, I should say, in all of this. Well, Invest in Washington Now came out with this email blast yesterday that was refuting most of what AWB's business members responded with, basically saying there's no evidence that anybody's going to be leaving. In fact, they said that actual data from across the country shows that state taxes don't cause moves by wealthy households. In fact, they said this. They said after the capital gains tax, Washington gained more millionaires, not less. They cite a study by the Institute of Policy Studies, IPS, that supposedly found the millionaires class grew by 46.9% in Washington, despite the state's first ever capital gains tax. Now, there is a lot of criticism by critics of Invest in WA now because they are a union backed group. You've got, in many cases, government money going to fund Invest in WA now. And then this is the group that is, fighting to make sure that there are more progressive taxes in the state of Washington. They contend that the Association of Washington Business is a far right Republican back group. They're nonpartisan. Um, so, some of that argument, that a lot of that pushback, you're going to be seeing that in the ad campaigns in the months to come leading up to November. You'll see these ads sponsored by Invest in WA now. But I did get a comment back from Patrick Connor, who's the state director for the National Federation of Independent Business, NFIB. They're a party to the lawsuit against the income tax, but he refuted a lot of what Invest in WA was saying. And he cited some statistics I found to be pretty fascinating, according to a recent Kiplinger report that came out. Said California lost $11.9 billion in adjusted gross income, AGI. New York lost 9.9 billion. Illinois lost 6 billion, and he cites a couple of others. So he says the evidence is that in these high tax states like California, New York, Illinois, Washington, you do have, capital flight and the wealthy leaving and the business creators, the innovators not choosing to locate in those high tax states because it's, going to cost them literally out of their own pockets. So fascinating conversation with Morgan Irwin and AWB. I would encourage you to check out my article up at the Center Square Washington page today for links to their survey, a much deeper dive on all the findings, like what exactly is it the businesses are saying? Well, they're saying it's the high tax burden. They're saying it's the regulations. They cite a number of things, different priorities for business that are major concerns for them. So check out that article on our Center Square Washington page today. Today, Let's Go Washington announced they have received their initiative ballot titles from the Office of the State Attorney General and our governor. That means the group is preparing to launch their signature gathering effort moving forward in hopes, they say, of repealing the newly signed income tax bill. It was about a month ago that Let's Go Washington's founder, Brian Haywood, filed close to a dozen potential initiatives aimed at repealing the so-called millionaire's tax. This is, of course, the 9.9% tax on those who make more than $1 million or combined household income above $1 million. Based on what you make in 2028, you'd be paying in 2029. That would be the first year the state would be receiving profits from the millionaire's tax. But many believe this is a tax eventually going to be lowered. The threshold would be lowered to be eventually a tax on all income earners in the state of Washington. So now we have Let's Go Washington receiving their ballot titles and saying, we're ready to move forward. Now, as I mentioned, there are about a dozen different potential versions of this initiative to potentially repeal the income tax that are moving forward. They haven't said exactly which one of those is going to move forward. We expect to find that out very soon. But Hallie Balch with Let's Go Washington today told me they expect Pacifica Law Group, actively involved in supporting the income tax, to kind of, in her words, play their political games and challenge the titles So at this point, they're not saying which one of those is going to move forward. I think they're waiting to find out exactly what the legal challenge is going to be to each of those before they make a determination on which one of those will move forward. Back on Monday, I should tell you that, in case you missed it, the Washington State Supreme Court denied Let's Go Washington's attempt for a repeal of the Secretary of State, saying you can't move forward with a referendum on the income tax because of a necessity clause that was attached to the bill, making it essential to the state budget. And the Secretary of State cited the fact that, this has been the precedent, and a necessity clause attached precludes a vote of the people via referendum. State Supreme Court agreed. So that left Let's Go Washington with the option of moving forward with initiatives as they are now. So I spoke to Let's Go Washington's spokesman today, Darren Littell, who told me that they are receiving overwhelming, unprecedented support from people saying, we want to help gather signatures. We want to do whatever we can to potentially repeal this income tax even before it takes effect.
We are really excited about the fact that we got some ballot titles back, and those ballot titles are ones that we are confident will convince people that this is the right thing to do, repealing this income tax that's going to eventually hit absolutely every person here in Washington State. And so there is enough in the ballot title that we think it is clear enough that we're excited to move forward. The response to the initiatives this year is unlike anything we've seen before. Last year we did Initiative 2066, which stopped the natural gas ban. And at that time, it felt like there was an overwhelming amount of support, but it's truly unprecedented. Every day when we go out and talk to people, we hear more and more stories of folks that are concerned that this is going to affect them, that this tax is going to be expanded, that they already have plans to move out, and they say, look, I'm not going to be paying this tax right off the bat, but I know eventually it's going to come for me. And so I either need to get out or I need to do something. And so how can I help? How can I sign up? What can I do? And so, we've got thousands of people who have signed up already to receive petitions, which is more than we've ever had before in any of the other initiative signing campaigns we've done. So we're pretty excited about the enthusiasm out there, and we're going to continue to build on it and let people know, eventually they're going to need to vote yes to stop the income tax, and look forward to being successful in November.
Washington voters have 10 times rejected an income tax, and the Washington State Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that income is property subject to our state constitution. And that means that income has to be taxed uniformly. Your property is uniformly 1% tax. So you can't have just millionaires taxed by this new income tax. It would have to be uniform. And so that is one of the main contentions for challengers to the income tax. Now, Invest in Washington Now, one of the main advocacy groups backing the income tax, emailed me a response today upon learning that Let's Go Washington's initiative campaign is moving forward. This is what they sent me in part. They claim their polling shows Washingtonians overwhelmingly support fixing Washington's upside down tax code, with 60% support of the millionaire's tax to fund education and healthcare. The state, they say, is backed up by the landslide rejection of Brian Haywood's Initiative 2109, with 64% of voters choosing to maintain the capital gains tax on extraordinary profits in 2024. So at this point, a decision on which initiative moves forward has not been made. I'm told that will be made in the weeks ahead. Again, based on what the legal world pushing against the ballot titles have to come back with for Let's Go Washington. So stay tuned for that.